story of Ballinascreen begins in the valley of the Six Towns, for it is here that we find the ruins of St. Columba's Shrine or Screen Church, from which the parish takes its name, Ballinascreen, or the Town of the Shrine. The church was converted into a screen or repository for the sacred vessels and manuscripts of the surrounding churches by St. Columba, but it is now generally agreed that the original building was founded by St. Patrick. This is one of the 7 churches which, as the Book of Armagh tells us, he founded in the plain of Madola, or, as we would pronounce it, the plain of the Moyola.
A further evidence of St. Patrick's visitation of this area is found in the loch on the other side of the hill from the Six Towns, Loch Patrick, where you have a traditional terrace or station dedicated to the saint, the origin of which goes way back into antiquity, just like Loch Derg or Croagh Patrick. Now, a custom of that kind, a pilgrimage of that kind, just doesn't grow from nothing. It must have a real origin and a real association with St. Patrick.
All we would do, you know, is come and make the station. We'd come 3 times, and each time we would go around the loch 3 times and see the players. And we'd come barefoot and make the station. And go on our way back home barefoot. And many a cold evening like this, we were up barefoot. And that time the people used to tell, there used to come a lot of them. Would come from away up there in Tyrone, and would come from the way over at Monument Chapel. And they'd come from everywhere, and they'd carry winds till there's anything the matter with them, or the wind open, or that they would bathe them in the loch.
The graveyard of the old church, the old patrician or Columban church, was used for burials long after the church had fallen into decay. And it contained the graves of many priests and of one bishop of the diocese. His tomb is there and can be seen with the inscription, "Here lies the body of Neil Conway, Bishop of Derry, who died on the 6th of January 1739.
The present-day church at Six Towns was built in 1853, the initial impetus coming from the laity of the district. They felt that they needed a church, so they proceeded to build one without further ado. This kind of independence did not please the clergy of the parish, especially in 1853, but after a token submission, agreement was reached and the building completed, and it is substantially the same building that serves the district today. The school at Six Towns continues a tradition for learning which goes right back to the days of St. Columba himself. At the other end of the parish, sloping down from the foothills of the Spirins, lies the district of Moninina. Like the Six Towns area, it has no definite centre of population or commerce. It is basically a farming community, and the houses are dotted all around the valley, though in recent years there has been a tendency, especially among the younger people, to move down towards the main road and the amenities which it offers. This has led to the creation of a number of small housing estates, but the district has lost none of its friendly country nature. The church is the real centre of Moninina, and besides providing a place of worship, it has given unity and cohesion to an otherwise scattered community. It is a fairly spacious building in the traditional cruciform shape, with some quite attractive windows. Despite its capacity, there is little room to spare when all the people of Moninina have gathered in on a Sunday morning. There are two schools in this district. The Ballinascreen School is a completely new building which replaces several smaller and older schools. The school at Ballinascreen has been renovated recently and now enjoys all the amenities and aids to modern education. The scenery in Ballinascreen parish is beautiful by any standards, especially on the Ballinascreen side. But it is not dramatic enough to attract tourists in any great numbers. This is essentially farming country and will probably always remain so. There may be a shift of emphasis from one type of farming to another, as today there appears to be a tendency towards cattle grazing and away from the mixed farming that has always been traditional here. Dairy farming is by no means widespread, but a few farmers still carry it on. They do not generally go in for dairy farming at the expense of everything else, for both the high price of fodder during a bad year and the low price of milk could have disastrous effects. Mixed farming is still the rule, but it too is beginning to die out. We spoke to one farmer from the Ballinascreen area about his work.
Farms around here in Ireland very big, you know, with average farms around from 15, we'll say, to 25 acres. Because there's bigger ones than that. There's farmers who bought on other farms as they became big, and, you know, people maybe left them or died out or something like that, you know. But the whole idea around here seems to be to get your farm out under grass. There's cropping has dropped off a whole lot in the last lot of years, you know. Still a few acres of spuds, you know, nothing like it used to be, but of barley. Barley hasn't really got a great headway, you know. The acreage is small, seemingly from 4 to 10 acres on a farm. That's like on a farm, we'll see a man has got up something up to 40 to 50 acres, you know, he makes with it. There's plenty of farms, there's no barley growing on. The whole idea seems to be to get your farm mechanised, you know, get it as much land as leaves it worth your while to buy in machinery, you know. It's nearly impossible to get labour, you know. You do hear that it costs you too much, and you wouldn't really have enough. When you count the labour, what you pay for the labour, you'd have nothing. You wouldn't have wages for your own work. That's the idea. It's, with grazing there, you can, you know, you only need to worry about a bit of hay or some feed for your cattle in the winter time, and you can usually manage that now with some mix a bit of silage and getting hay baled. There's quite a lot of balers come into the area now.
Many parts of Ballinascreen, which are too mountainous and boggy for cultivation, have been given over to forestry with great success. Large tracts have been planted out with pine and fir trees, and besides making good use of mountainy land, this industry has provided work for a large number of local men. These and their families are housed in the attractive estates built specially for forestry workers by the Ministry of Agriculture. Extensive as it is, however, afforestation covers only a small percentage of mountainy and rough ground. The greater part of it is given over to sheep farming, and this type of living has thrived here for many years. All the farmers keep at least some sheep, and many have given their entire farms over to them. It is a moderately successful business in normal conditions, but if the winter is particularly severe, much of the farmer's profit will go in fodder for the sheep. Again, if the winter is particularly good, there will be a big increase in the number of sheep on the market, and hence the prices will fall. And whether the winter is good or bad, there is always the expense of clipping, dosing, marking, and dipping the sheep. Not to mention the few that will always come to grief through some accident or other. However, on the first Wednesday of the last 4 months of the year, the farmer reaps the reward of his labours at the big sheep market in Draperstown. The village of Draperstown is the modern centre of Ballinascreen parish. It was known as the Cross in early times, but it eventually took its name from the Drapers' Company of London, who colonised it in the early 17th century. However, it was the early 19th century before the name of Draperstown became common, and even then it was generally given both titles. The physical layout of the village is distinctly English. A triangular village green bounded on two sides by the Protestant churches and by the police station and the courthouse on the other. The old courthouse now serves as a library, but one may well be forgiven for wondering what possible need a place the size of Draperstown had for its own courthouse. A possible explanation lies in the fact that there was little love lost between the natives of the area and the settlers from England, and clashes of opinion were a fairly frequent occurrence. There is little trace of the Drapers' Company today, apart from a row of charming little houses which they built. The village is expanding on all sides, and new houses are springing up everywhere. Draperstown's memories may stem from the 18th and 19th centuries, but today her feet are firmly planted in the 20th century. The biggest single employer in Ballinascreen is this shirt factory. Labour is mostly female, and were it not for it, many of these girls would have to travel a considerable distance to find work. One of the directors of the firm takes up its story.
Well, we started across the street, the premises you've probably seen about 1950. That was in an upstairs room where we had about 6-8 machines. And we stood there for about 6 months. At that time as well, we used outworkers around the houses, although after about 6 months that stopped. Well, when we were there about a year, we opened a place downstairs, which sort of doubled the capacity. And we stood there for, I suppose, another 2 to 3 years before we came over here to the site that we're on at the moment. At that time it was a Scotch mill for Scotch and flax, and it wasn't in use. So we converted it and it gave us about double the capacity that we had across the street. While since then we've been sort of adding on to this building every year, every 18 months, we've probably added on about 5 or 6 times to it. Well, that brings us right up to this year when we've got a government factory that you've seen next door, and at the moment now we're using the both of them. As far as workers are concerned, we have, I would say, about 100 females and about 15 or 16 men, and they produce somewhere short of 1,000 dozens a week. This is completely boys or young men's shirts, teenage trade, and we sell them all over the British Isles, and we're doing some in there as well. But there's no export apart from England, Scotland and Wales. We bring the girls in at any age at all to train, but we prefer them, 15, 16, just leaving school. And they start off training on a training bench, where we have a girl who's qualified to train them. They start off in paper shapes and sewing around designs and that sort of thing. And then they go on to pieces of cloth or the easier parts of a shirt. And when they've sort of got a bit of practice at that, we put them on to, any part of a shirt that we feel they're most suitable. And, there's varying lengths of time it takes to train them. You know, some of them are quite skilled after 6 months, others probably a year.
This metal factory was opened only a few years ago. It does many kinds of wrought iron and sheet metal work and is still developing its scope. The character of Market Day in Draperstown has changed much in recent years, but it is still very different from the other 6 days of the week. The traffic around the streets is much heavier than usual, though strangely enough, there is not an equivalent increase in the number of people to be seen. There are still a few market stalls in the street, but nothing like the same flurry of business that used to be common on a market day 30 or 40 years ago. The only thriving centre of business is the cattle mart, and here one will find all the farmers of Ballinascreen and the neighbouring towns gathered together on a Friday morning. It is a very successful mart with a big turnover of business, but apart altogether from the business end, it has become a kind of unofficial meeting place of the farming and dealing community, where they meet each other, discuss their problems and keep abreast of the trade.
24 the England 74 pounds. And before I half again there, 20 on 74 the England 74 pounds. And 24 the
Even more encouraging than the thriving factories and cattle mart is the fact that young people are anxious to pick up new ideas and to help in putting them into practice. A most notable example of this kind of enthusiasm was the recent horticultural show, which was patronized by all sections of the community, and which left the judges in the various sections with a very difficult task. To the younger competitors, it was a real challenge, not merely to produce something of worth for their own satisfaction, but to compete against their elders in the traditionally adult skills of baking, bottling, and vegetable growing. The competitive element gave a new impulse to skills which were perhaps in danger of dying out. The horticultural show is just another example of the changing times in Ballinascreen.
Father Collins, you have been 26 years, I think it is, in this parish, both as curate and as parish priest. Have you noticed many great changes during that period, and are there any great changes you would like to see?
Well, I have watched over the years, you see. It's like grass growing. I think that when you're there on the spot all the time, that you don't notice a change. There have been tremendous change, I think, for anybody that's seen it as I saw it in the beginning and would go away and come back now and see it again. But it's very hard for me to pinpoint, you might put it, I suppose, particular items. There's been a growth in the town population, undoubtedly, and an increase in the number of houses in the town. Unfortunately, there has been a falling off in the rural areas, most disappointing, and that's just one of the things that this horticultural show is aimed at improving or helping to remedy.
The schools of the parish provide the most notable example of these changing times in Ballinascreen. In years past, there was one rather decrepit primary school in the whole village of Draperstown. Today, there is a large new primary school and, in addition, an intermediate school which carries the children's education on to 15 and 16 years of age. It covers every conceivable subject, with an emphasis on the practical application of education. For most of these boys and girls will be earning their living by manual labour of some sort or another. And besides, the sight of an article which he or she has just made is a great encouragement to any pupil. Dressmaking has been traditional in Irish schools for many years, but the pupils' own little fashion parade helps to develop their awareness of line and colour much more effectively than any number of lessons. Not merely is a first-class library available to the pupils, but also expert guidance in the use of it for study and research. Likewise, in the primary school, all the modern aids to education are made available. The style of lesson has broadened out a great deal, and it has become a more interesting venture for both pupil and teacher. It is rather hard to believe that only a generation ago, the children of this parish were going to school with 2 sods of turf under their arms to keep the school fires burning.
All right, Polly. Hi, Polly.
This school at Dramard is the oldest link with the past in education, but it is soon to be closed, and the children will be incorporated into the Draperstown schools. Physical education was never given any great attention in the past, but in recent years, its importance both for mind and body has been rediscovered. Not that it is any hardship for the young people, for the vaulting horse is just a more disciplined form of outlet for their boundless energy. The spacious new gymnasium of the intermediate school, with its basketball court, gives the children their first real taste of competitive sport. No game is quite so popular in Ballinascreen as Gaelic football. The present parish priest has done much to encourage and revive it at a time when it was in danger of disappearing. The local football field is named after Dean McGlinchey, the last parish priest of Ballinascreen, also a strong supporter of all things Gaelic. As in all games, the quality of football in Ballinascreen varies from year to year. On occasions, the local team has done extremely well, and this year it has advanced as far as the semi-final of the county championship. Today, they take on Newbridge at neutral ground in Machrafelt in their efforts to reach the final. Gaelic football is such an accepted part of life in Ballinascreen today that it is hard to imagine that it was introduced little more than half a century ago. A look at the reports of the Drapers' Company for the early part of the 19th century can be very revealing, not so much for what they contain as for what they omit. These reports were designed to give a full and overall picture of life as it was lived by the tenants of this estate. 5 of these reports were submitted between the years 1817 and 1827, and they cover everything from undesirable school books to missing gateposts. They describe the mud cabins that most of the people lived in, with neither window to let in light nor chimney to let out smoke. They point out the uneconomic patches of land where the same crops of flax and potatoes were sown year after year. They discuss the politics, the religion, the courts of law, and the commerce of the district. But never once do they mention sport or entertainment. The nearest they come to it is a suggestion that the 50 guineas at present set aside to provide a trophy for the Derry races might be better employed if spent on the education of some of the young people. Obviously, sport was the prerogative of the moneyed classes, and as such had no part in the life of the people of Ballinascreen. It is only in the later part of the century, when conditions have improved and many of the people have bought out their own farms, that sports and entertainments begin to take their rightful place in the community. The rise of Gaelic football dates from this time, and with varying degrees of popularity, it has continued right down to the present day. There is a wide choice of entertainment open to the people today, but despite this fact, both the players and the supporters of Gaelic football have continued to grow in numbers every year. Football is not the only form of outdoor entertainment. Such workaday exercises as reversing a tractor have been converted into competitive events. However, the most popular of these local pastimes is undoubtedly tug-of-war. There are teams from the different townlands and from different age groups, and they are all extremely proud of their reputations. Keeley dancing is by far the most popular indoor pastime in Ballinascreen. The different local bodies take turns in organising Keeleys, and they can always be sure of a good turnout. This is due, in large measure, to the work of the Kerrigan Dancing School in Draperstown, which has kept alive the spirit of Irish dancing where it would otherwise have died. It is one of the few places where one can see Irish dancing done really well by the whole community. The annual Fish at Ballinascreen is perhaps the most important social event of the year.
The Irish form of the name of the Fish is Fish Chunachine, and it's a name which puzzles many people. Some think it's a translation of Draperstown, but it actually refers to a disciple of Columkill, Conaghan, who is said to have stayed behind in the parish when Columkill visited Ballinascreen, and to have built a church below Draperstown, which today is called Kilconaghan. It was founded by Father Collins, the present parish priest, and it owes its development to him. He was chairman of the committee for 25 years, and in the early years it was encouraged by the parish priest at that time, Dean McGlinchey. The Fish has been very successful. It has grown enormously down the years. And at the Fishes today, over 1,000 children turn up to dance. This requires a lot of organization and a lot of patience. And it is regarded, and I suppose rightly so, by most people as the Children's Day, and above all, as a social occasion when you turn out to meet your friends. Whole families come to the Fish. It's something that everybody can get something out of. You can watch the dancing, or go inside and listen to the choirs and the solo singing. An event of this kind being completely voluntary, depending on a voluntary committee, owes enough a great deal to the help of dozens, indeed hundreds of people from Draperstown and the area around it. People give their help unstintingly and willingly for the success of the Fish. And without all this help, which is offered every year, there simply wouldn't be a Fish.
Here in the foyer of St. Colum's Secondary School in Ballinascreen is one of the best-known collections of folk material in Ireland. It has been collected by the pupils of this school under the direction of their headmaster, Mr. James Gunn. Mr. Gunn, what is the purpose of this exercise?
Well, this has been an attempt over the last number of years to gather some material which would give us a sort of a picture in this particular form of the social development of the area. Something of the lives of the people, their community life, their trades, their crafts, farming implements, tools of different kinds, and various pursuits, is illustrated by the things we have in the collection.
This rather crude-looking weapon is a flail, used for threshing corn. The querns, or millstones, were used for grinding corn. It was poured onto the lower stone and crushed by the weight of the upper stone revolving on it. These are harnan stands or bread stands. The loaf was simply leaned up against the frame before the fire. An immense variety of turf spades can be found, though these are a little more exotic than usual. And this was the normal type of footwear in the past, a clog with a wooden sole and a tough leather upper. This pair was intended for some unfortunate lady, believe it or not. Here we have a selection of stone axe heads and arrowheads used by the earliest settlers in Ballinascreen. At one time, water wheels such as this were commonly used to drive threshing and milling machinery. They all lie in ruins today. Many visitors expect to find Ireland a land of donkey carts and jaunting cars. But the fact of the matter is that a pony and cart is a rarity in any part of Ireland today. Even the traditional thatched roof is rapidly disappearing. Tiled or slated roofs are there to stay, but thatch requires regular and expert maintenance. Turf cutting is one of the few solid links with the past that has survived to the present day. The supplies of turf are still plentiful. The scarcity of labour is the only thing in danger of doing away with it. First, the turf has to be cut into sods and then spread out flat on the ground. When it has hardened somewhat, it is stacked into little groups or rickles, consisting of 4 or 5 turfs, to allow the wind to blow through it. It may even be built up into a slightly bigger stack, consisting of crisscross layers of turf to dry it out more thoroughly. This is perhaps the most difficult part of the whole operation, for Irish weather is never very dependable, and the season may end and the turf will still be quite damp. When it is fairly well dried out, it is either stacked on the mountain for use the following year, or carted off straight away for burning. There used to be many cottage industries in Ballinascreen at one time, but they have all disappeared now, and perhaps the only surviving handicraft is to be found in this small shop in Draperstown. Felix Mullen has been a saddler all his life, just like his father and grandfather before him. He works in an atmosphere of resin and leather, surrounded by horse collars, brass ornaments, and a vast assembly of the tools of his trade.
This is a particularly old-looking premises. Tell me something about it.
Well, these premises are about 200 years of age. And I'm the generation of the last generation saddle makers in Ballinascreen. At the very beginning, the owners travelling tradesmen or journeymen. I was handed down from my grandfather and my father and then to me. That's all I moved with and went from town to town. And we settled, our people settled here in this place now. Grandfather settled down.
So this shop would be?
It's very old, but the oldest in the parish here.
200 years?
Over 200 years of age.
With the dyeing trade, there's also the implements that you use are dying out too.
Yes.
We have some of them here. Could you tell us something about them? What, for example, is this particular instrument?
That one is still in use. That's known as a plough knife, or cutting a strap to any length or breadth. That's still in use.
And this here is a particularly, it looks more like a weapon than a tool.
There's a bit of a joke to this. A bit of a joke to this. One wee boy came in one day and asked me what was this for. I told him it was for anybody that wouldn't pay. I just took him what they had with. It's really for making the collar rims.
Of the saddle?
The saddle, or the collar. Knocking out the rims. That's known as a mallet, a collar mallet.
This tool resembles a tool used by old shoemakers. It seems to be generally used in leather work. What exactly is it?
This is known as a stitching wheel for marking the length of your stitches. So many stitches to inch. Mark it then, it keeps the stitches all even.
Well, there have been 8 generations of Mullins in this trade. Will there be a 9th?
I'm afraid not. I suppose it's just day out. And it's very sad to see a day out. Nobody taking up. But I'm not going to learn anybody now. Just going to finish.
You're the last?
I'm the last.
During the 19th century, it was a rare occurrence to find a Catholic church in a town or village in Ireland. The penal laws were no longer in force, but the Catholic was still a second-class citizen, and it was not considered wise to make things too easy for him. The Catholics of Ballinascreen had to work under these restrictions too. Their parish church was built in 1853, not in the village of Draperstown, as we might expect, but in the townland of Straw, 2 miles outside it. This must have been quite a hardship for them in those times, but today, with better roads and better means of transport, the hardship is not quite so noticeable. On weekdays, the people can attend Mass in a little oratory in the village, but on Sunday, they all travel out to this church at Straw. It is impossible to say how deeply affected these people are by the faith, because they have practiced it staunchly for so many years and in face of so many hardships that it has become a most essential part of their lives. As one parishioner expressed it, to say that 99% of the people of Ballinascreen practice the faith would not be quite correct. It is much nearer 100%. It is clear from any historical study of the parish that the faith prospered here even in the worst of times. The long tradition of Catholicism was never broken, even by the colonists. The faith shows no signs of wavering today. It is not a noticeably aggressive or modern belief, but it displays a sincerity and a solidity which seem to guarantee its perseverance to the end of time. Schools and churches were often built alongside one another for convenience, and this is how we find it in Straw today. The present school building is about 10 years of age and caters for the children from the surrounding area. A wedding is a welcome sight in rural Ireland, for most parishes have suffered greatly from depopulation. Young people are forced to leave home in search of work, and when they leave, there is no one to take their place. Small farms are no longer able to support the same numbers, and even over a short period of time, one can see a noticeable decline in the population. Ballinascreen has suffered in the past in this way, but today the trend is beginning to taper off. There is still a tendency to move from the farms to the towns, or at least to move nearer the main roads, but the population is now holding steady. Many farmhouses have closed, and many new houses have opened, but over the past 5 years, the population has remained exactly the same. Perhaps more important and more encouraging than the number of marriages is the outlook of the young people who are getting married. It is difficult to make comparisons of this kind, but to the stranger at least, the young men and women here seem to be much more mature and responsible than the average. They can enjoy themselves when the occasion arises, but they display a sensible and realistic attitude to their work and to their duties to family and society in general. It is in fact no exaggeration to say that Ballinascreen's best security for the future is the quality of the young people it produces today.
Let us pray, Almighty and everlasting God, for his Creator, our first parents, Adam and Eve, and this join him and holy union to sanctify the hearts and bodies of these thy servants. Bless them and make them at one in love through Christ our Lord. May Almighty God bless you and unite your hearts in the lasting bonds of love. May you be blessed in your children, and may they return your love 100-fold. May the peace of Christ dwell always in your hearts and in your home. May you be blessed in your work and enjoy its fruits. May the Lord grant you the harvest of a good life. So may you serve him faithfully in his kingdom on earth, and merit the reward of his kingdom in heaven. Go in peace, and the Lord be always with you.
All members of a parish, both clergy and laity, are bound together by their faith, and the degree of understanding and cooperation which exists between them determines to a large extent the well-being of the parish. Ballinascreen has not merely preserved the faith down the centuries, but has done much to spread it. There are 11 priests from Ballinascreen working in the Diocese of Derry at present, and 11 others working in different parts of the world. There are also 40 nuns native of the parish. And though there has been a falling off in the number of vocations, both to the priesthood and the religious life in recent years, it is reasonable to hope that Ballinascreen will continue to provide men and women who will devote their lives to the spread of the gospel. This, at any rate, is the hope of their parish priest, Father Collins. He takes an understandable pride in all the achievements of the past, but he points out that they are due entirely to the goodwill and cooperation of the people. They have been called upon to make many sacrifices for their parish, he says, but their readiness to join wholeheartedly in every venture has made it a pleasure to work for them. We have only glanced at some aspects of life in Ballinascreen in this film, but many have not even been mentioned. Much has been done in the past, much still remains to be done, but with God's help, we will try to do it.